So why don't you give the audience yours, tell the folks here about your background, which includes some interesting details like founding a company in his teens and being on the board of one of San Francisco's finest museums.
You gave away my best hits
Sorry.
there, Rob. It's okay. Hey, folks, I'm Jonathan. I did start a company when I was 19, barely kind of squeaked out of high school and didn't manage to go to college, which I just think is just a testament to the power of tech and that, even a kind of a silly guy like me can do something and get lucky every now and then. I spent 20 odd years as an operator and engineer building engineering teams, building products, a lot of different parts of the infrastructure on the internet. I started in web hosting and then kind of worked my way up the stack to utility computing or cloud computing as we know it today at a business called Opsware, and then helped Walmart, the little retailer in the US, transition their business online, helped Facebook grow to about 1 billion people.
Small social network, you may have heard of them.
Yeah, now called Meta, I guess. Was called Facebook at the time. And today I'm a general partner at Vertex Ventures in the US. We're B2B software investors, early stage, which is a loosely used term. We can maybe get into that more lately, but generally we'll invest as early as an idea and a whiteboard and as late as a couple $1 million in revenue. And then, like you said, along the way, have helped organizations like the Exploratorium, which is a great museum in San Francisco. If you haven't been, it's all about hands-on learning.
Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. Great for kids of all ages. That's most of me.
So now you're an investor. Let's talk about lessons learned from investors you've picked up over that time. What are the sort of early stage pitfalls people should be trying to avoid?
Well, I think in today's market, it's we should try to avoid things where you can't squint and figure out how you're going to make money doing it. That seems to be a key narrative in the headlines these days. I think one of the other things I've learned, both as a founder, was fortunate to have started 3 companies, mostly successful, one not so successful, is that you can never fire your investor. Once you hire an investor and they're on your cap table, you've sold equity to them, you can't retrade that. You can't get rid of it. And so we spend a lot of time coaching founders and entrepreneurs that you should actually get to know your investors before you take their money. Unlike someone you hire, an employee you hire, founders actually spend a lot of time interviewing and vetting employees, but oftentimes just sort of take the first money they get from an investor, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, that's an I want to sort of explore that a little bit.
Yeah.
The notion of hiring somebody that you then can't fire, but you use this phrase in our call, hire your investors as you would hire your talent.
Yep.
So, yeah, for the founders out there, what are the questions they should have for their next potential
Top of mind,
investor?
yeah. I mean, I think, the question I always ask founders is, what do you want besides help? Every investor has money. My money is as green as her money and as green as his money. But it's, what type of help do you want? What type of help do you need? Whether that's, a Sunday night call when things aren't going well, or, help recruiting, help developing customers, help developing your pitch, or no help at all. That's also totally fine. We call those folks investors, and we call the people who provide a lot of help and services partners, because it's a bit of a different mentality as to how they engage. And investors might be great if you need $10 million or $100 million by Friday, say. They're going to be good at that. They're going to make a decision in 48 hours and, wire the money in your bank account. But a partner investor tend to be a little bit more thoughtful and kind of like having another co-founder who's available but not in control like a co-founder would be.
Yeah, you wrote a good post on that partner versus investor distinction, where you're talking about there's always that no strings attached fast money.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's still the risk that you will lose a potential portfolio company because they do just want the money without someone being so annoying as to suggest how they spend it.
It definitely happens. As investors, we've lost a lot of deals on, or a lot of investments on price, where we haven't been willing to pay what another investor's been willing to pay or another partner's been willing to pay. But we've also lost deals or not made investments when we just don't have philosophical alignment with the founders. And my partners and I collectively have started 6 companies. And so we've done it a number of times. It's not to say that we're experts. It's not to say that we know everything. We absolutely don't. One of the things that we think is actually very important from investors is curiosity, and having that shared curiosity with founders is very important. And so as such, what we look for then in founders are people that have encountered a big problem themselves in their lives, especially in enterprise and especially in B2B software. And a great example of this is Edith Harbaugh, who started LaunchDarkly, which is a developer tool, allows developers to ship software faster with more confidence. She was a product manager at TripIt, the travel planning app a few years ago. And she was just constantly struggling with, she could never do enough experiments, she could never ship software quickly enough, and was very frustrated with this. And so she built a system internally at TripIt to solve this problem, and then realized that lots of other enterprises likely had that problem, and she left. She started LaunchDarkly now almost 8 years ago, and today it's a phenomenal business. It's raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It more importantly produces tens of millions, almost hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and employs.
And no squinting needed to figure out the business model there.
Exactly. Yeah. As soon as we met Edith and her co-founder John, you could see in how she had already thought about what she was going to charge for, what economic unit she was going to use, and how and why enterprises wanted to pay for it. And so diligence for us was really easy to conduct because we called, our friends and our people and people we knew, and there was just immediate resonance with this problem. It also helped that I built a similar system at Facebook, and so I had also experienced this problem firsthand, and so it was love at first sight, if you will.
Got it. So you mentioned Sunday night anxious calls from founders. What kind of things are people nervous about when they call, whether it's Sunday night or Sunday morning or Monday morning?
Yeah, goodness, everything. The topics are very broad. From I had a disagreement with my co-founder and I can't resolve it, to I'm trying to hire a new head of marketing or head of engineering and struggling to figure out to put together an offer package because I don't know where the person is or what to give them. Or did you see this announcement from this competitor in TechCrunch and this thing happened and it's totally fake news and how are we going to battle this and all of those types of problems. So yeah, we have constant conversations like that. The subjects are always changing, but I think it's good just to sort of have the perspective of not just being honestly old or experienced. Thankfully, I got started at a young age. I started when I was working on the internet when I was 16, but also just having the experience of breadth of working with dozens of companies over longer periods of time. I think being a founder is all-consuming. I've been there. I have utmost respect for founders, and in some sense, still a founder as the founder of an investment firm. But because it's all-consuming, it's really hard to sort of know what's happening outside in the ecosystem all the time. And I think that's one of the jobs of an investor is to be the sort of outward radar to know what's happening all around you all the time.
So I see Vertex just hired a sort of separate group of people to work on this, the Vertex Fellows. Where did the idea come from? How do you hire for that? It sounds like you need to sort of select for a certain level of empathy. Where some Silicon VCs select for the lack of it, but
yes. Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely value empathy in our group. And so, yeah, great to hit on the Vertex Fellows. We started Vertex in the US 7 years ago, and conveniently we're also a team of 7 people. There's 4 investors and 3 operators, and so that allows us to be fairly focused in companies we work with and how we help them. But we don't know everything, and we shouldn't know everything. Our job is to know sort of where the next smart person is, the next industry insider or expert. And so, like you said, Rob, we recruited a handful of fellows to be in an inaugural class of people. And the idea is really that they themselves have deep operational expertise in specific they themselves have deep operational expertise in specific domain areas. So marketing, product, finance, HR and people, and then product marketing in particular, because all of our early stage founders, again, they're solving problems in the enterprise. They can appreciate the technical side of the challenge, but less so maybe the business side of how would you present the business case or the ROI story for building a product. And so the idea of having these fellows work with us, work alongside of us in all of our portfolio companies is just force multiplication. We want more smart people helping all of our companies at the earliest stages. And the idea there is that we're learning along the way, but we're hopefully helping founders avoid making some of those mistakes that we've already made.
Right. So, yeah, what is the ratio then? How many portfolio companies does any one fellow work with? Is this something where they visit from one to the other?
Yeah, a
series of calls?
Yeah. We're not fairies, so we don't just sort of bounce in and bounce out of people's lives. We like kind of enduring relationships more than anything. And in the case of the fellows, what we've done is we've exposed all the fellows to all of the portfolio companies, and then we're looking for sort of mutual interests. Maybe one CEO says, hey, I really like Ed, and I've got finance problems. I'd like a follow-up with him. And then another CEO says, I've got people problems. I want to talk to Jermaine, and she seems nice and has some expertise. And of course, we have CEOs who are like, hey, I'm all good. I know everything. I don't need any help. Or the help I need, you don't have. Can we find someone else? Can we tap our network for a different kind of expertise? Maybe it's a recruiter or a CIO or another kind of enterprise buyer that may be much more helpful to that company at that moment in time. And again, I think one of the core jobs of a good investor who's going to be engaged is to know what resources and other expertise to bring to bear at the right moment in time for the company.
So it is a bit of a turbulent time in the economy, not to throw around economic jargon, kind of a hold on to your butt moment. Is this complicating portfolio companies that may have launched a few years ago, perhaps were looking forward to some sort of going public, some other liquidity event? What's the state of mind among the companies you work most closely with? What are they prepared to see happen in the next 6 months, and how is that changing their own plans?
Yeah. Well, the state of mind is, it's here today, right? And I think it's great to see so many people turning out at the Tech Summit.
I'm just happy we're not having this conversation on opposite screens.
That is true. There's real people here, right? This is not a
Where's the
virtual
mute
event.
button?
Yeah. So I think state of mind, it really depends on where you are in growing your company and growing your business. At least the 40 or so companies that we work with, that's what we've concluded. And I would say at the early stages, while being worried about efficiency and burn rate is absolutely important and critical, and has always should have been a topic, ultimately growth needs to happen. Because when you're a seed or seed company, until you've turned into a beautiful flower, it kind of doesn't matter how efficient you are, right? That is still the job of venture capital. It's to take a risk on a team of people with an idea that they're going to turn it into something great and interesting. And I think, so for the companies that are kind of at seed and Series A, they're, call it dozens of people in size, growth is still important, but now efficiency of that growth starts to enter the conversation. But because we're investing in enterprise and B2B, which maybe is sort of more boring than, say, gorillas or on-demand services or different types of things, we've already squinted and sort of done the math on how is this company going to make money, what are they going to sell, who their buyer is, what are the economic returns for that, how is it going to make a dent in the world, so to speak. But writ large in the market, there's absolutely a lot of hand-wringing and concern, and I think we've seen now dozens of layoffs be announced. It seems like, at least in Silicon Valley, the standard, even though many of these companies are global, is to provide 14 weeks of severance. It's quickly become the standard, which is pretty significant, especially relative to layoffs that happened in 2008, the last time there was a downturn.
That was all sorts of fun.
That was all sorts of fun, and I think the big difference then, especially in enterprise, is that tech was not as present in 2008 as it is today. And we've got Zoom over here, and the idea that distributed work now is a thing, and it exists, and people can work from anywhere, is tremendous. And so as such, I think that's it's freed people from the shackles of coming to the office every day, but it's also freed companies from having to maintain an office and maintain real estate. We've seen businesses like Twilio and Shopify announce that they're creating cafes where they'll open to the public, but their employees can also use it as a workspace and a collaboration space to hang out and work together.
So I did notice, your portfolio companies, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of dependency on decentralized finance or cryptocurrency. Was that deliberate? Is anyone patting themselves on the back for that right now at your shop?
Well, we are. We're brilliant because we didn't make those moves. Very, very, very joking
So
in
prescient.
in that comment. Very, very joking. Yeah, I mean, gone are the days where WeWork and GoPuff can just continue to sort of ride the wave of more and more free capital. And as interest rates rise and debt gets more expensive, then that makes any company that's building a hardware product or has to rely on debt financing, it makes it more challenging for them, absolutely. And I think it is perhaps one of the biggest reasons why we as investors, not only because we grew up as software founders and entrepreneurs ourselves, but it's why we like investing in software businesses, where the cost to produce the product is labor, is people. There's very low cost of goods, relatively speaking. And if perhaps the business faces headwinds, it's relatively easy, again, to reposition the product. It's more about product marketing and how that product is explained and described, which is another thing we've been spending time with founders on is, for example, we had one of our portfolio companies sold a great product to a high-flying fintech company that recently went public, and the messaging was all about.
It could be.
I won't say the name, but the messaging was all about growth, speed, increasing growth. Well, they're now selling that same product to a large social media company that's in the midst of takeover talks, and the messaging is a little bit different. It's all about efficiency and how you can do more with less engineers. Same product, but different product marketing, and you really see then the impact that product marketing can have on a product and on the buyer's willingness to spend money on it.
So another thing I was struck at looking at where you've placed your investments, there is some global exposure. I know you've got some significant companies doing interesting work in India. You have an office in China. Do you want to sort of expound on those two very large markets, which right now seems to be in different places in terms of their openness to the rest of the world?
Definitely. Yeah, so there's a little bit, it's a slightly complex story, but I'll try to be brief here, which is that when my partners and I, when we decided to start our fund in 2015, initially it was just the two of us, and we put together our pitch deck, and we went around looking for capital, and we had some of our own money, and we asked our friends, we asked our family, and then we started talking to institutions. And along the way, we intersected with an investor called Temasek, who's based in Singapore, with $300 billion in assets, and they had already had funds in Israel and China, and they invested in our fund, became our anchor investor, and as such, we are part of a global network of Vertex funds. So we have cousins or other funds in China, in Israel, in South Asia, but all of the funds are discrete and separate. They're kind of like a franchise, if you will, separately owned and managed, separate strategies. But we did it, one, because it was great to have a long-term partner as an anchor investor in the fund, and two, we wanted to have that perspective for ourselves and our portfolio companies who are maybe starting in the US or starting in Europe and then coming to the US to build their sales and marketing teams to know what's happening in China, in India, in Israel with a trusted partner. So that's the background. As far as what's happening in those markets, I actually haven't gotten sort of the current lay of the land in the last few weeks, but China is once again in a very interesting place, kind of like it was.
Not necessarily good interesting.
Yeah, not necessarily good interesting. I mean, I think in 2015 everyone was worried about the China takeover, and especially us, because we were worried about Chinese entrepreneurs starting native enterprise companies for the first time. Starting their equivalent of Intel or Dell or Oracle or Salesforce as built-in country solutions. And many of those businesses have taken off in China, but they haven't started selling outside of China, I think maybe due to the changes in political landscape that are well beyond my comprehension. But India, being a much more open market, is very different. And we've seen, just as the sort of well-trodden path from Israel to the US has been in place for 2 decades, more and more entrepreneurs starting a company in India and then opening an office either in New York or San Francisco, sometimes one of those few states in between those two, but most of the time in New York or San Francisco for sales and marketing, but where the core of the company is still based in India. And so we have an investment in a database company called Hasura. It's a GraphQL company for people playing along at home. And that's exactly the situation there. The two founders started the company in Bangalore, built the team up to about 50 people, and then came to San Francisco because I think the thing that's special about Silicon Valley is not the engineers It's not even the entrepreneurs. It's that there's sales and marketing knowledge and expertise there. And it's being able to meet people who are literally miles away from each other's offices. And so it's critical for founders that are selling into the enterprise to have those relationships and have those connections. And that's why being in the Bay Area or another major metro is important.
I mean, the weather's nice there too.
The weather's not bad. Yeah. The irony of summer in San Francisco is that June is actually the worst month to be there because it's just foggy the whole time.
Well, you just got to remember to bring a fleece jacket, even though it is June, July.
Yeah,
August.
exactly. Yeah.
So I think I may be the token Washingtonian here, so I have to ask a policy question.
Okay.
There's a lot of chatter going on around D.C., some of which may actually result in legislation going somewhere about privacy. What should we do about it? How can we sort of give people a little more agency and have them feel less like they are just under one tech company or another's microscope? Do you think that is likely to happen? And more importantly, how does that affect where you place your investment? It sounds like as a fund that is mostly focused on enterprise companies, you're less exposed to some law that might affect what kind of data a consumer company can gather.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Rob. As enterprise investors, we're not super exposed to privacy regulations, though many of the companies we invest in have developed solutions to help other companies solve those problems and manage PII or personal information or comply with GDPR or other regulations.
Or CCPA.
It is a big business, and it's I think rightly so as a consumer, we're all consumers, important for consumer and sort of individual rights that we do have controls that our information is safeguarded, whether it's health information or my social security number or other data. So we don't have a ton of exposure to it. We sell the sort of picks and shovels that enable it or make it possible to manage and wrestle and wrangle those beasts. And I do think that the legislation that's come, actually largely from the EU, ahead of the U.S. in this policy, has been positive for consumers. Now, do I believe in sort of like DeFi and de-information? Less so, honestly. I think that I think that society is pretty good at trusting central authorities for things, and advertising has proven when advertising works well, as it does on many social media platforms, to actually be a positive experience, that it actually increases consumer engagement and increases consumer trust in those brands. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But I think an important point to make here is that when the people designed those systems, at least the few that I was involved in, at Facebook, at Instagram, at places like that, there was no ill intention, but perhaps what wasn't fully managed were the unintended consequences of those systems.
We have a saying in Washington for that: mistakes were made.
There you go.
Passive voice construction is just wonderfully exculpatory.
Exactly. Yeah.
So my other Washington question is: Are there any other policy developments coming out of my city that do raise concerns? Like what do you not want my neighbors on Capitol Hill to be doing?
Honestly, I don't know that I have anything specific to add there in terms of policy, though my observation is that the policymakers are woefully behind and disconnected from what is happening in tech today and what the controls and possibilities of those controls could be.
Yes.
So I think it's beholden on us as leaders in tech to maybe bridge the gap and try to help shape that. Of course, I'm sure that founders and executives will be vilified for trying to write the rules that benefit them and their companies the most. But I think that's also part of how democracy works.
Indeed. Okay, then last question. Do you want to offer any sort of predictions about where you see your end of the tech market, enterprise software, going? What does it look like in a year from now? Assuming they have us back at DTS next year.
Yeah, let's see if we're still around then, right? Maybe
Right.
We'll be virtual again.
I hope not. I like being in Ireland.
It's great. It's great to be here. So predictions a year from now. Well, let me start with today, which is that in early stage funding for seed and Series A companies is still happening fast and furious. There are financings for $20, $30, $40 million that are getting done in a few weeks at sort of great valuations that I think founders are happy with. I think in the fall we're either going to see another massive fall or things will maybe come back to, to some level of where they were. And ultimately, I think a year from now, I think especially in the public markets and in the public tech stocks, I think we'll end up kind of settling out at about halfway between where we were, say end of 21, and then where we've gotten to today in 22. So I'm calling a 50% rebound.
That sounds like a vote of confidence, and I think we could all use that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, you all.